Hi guys, I'm Mike and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another F1 Worldwide, the fan podcast, and joining me today is someone relatively new to the F1 YouTube scene, but very good showing up. I think you've raced on to 700 odd subscribers in that rough time, but we are joined today by MotoMeerkat, or as he's formerly known, Sir Meerkat. So I do apologise. Welcome on to the show, mate. It's good to have you on.
Hello, buddy. Thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm super excited to get involved in chatting about all the nuances with F1 with yourself. So let's get into it.
So, originally, Moto gave me a message on Twitter and it was like, oh, you know, I'll be happy to come on the podcast at any time. And so we'd planned this podcast before the entire coronavirus had kind of escalated to the kind of rapid stage, and the fact that, you know, we're both in the UK and so we're now both on lockdown. So before it escalated that, this original theme for the podcast was we're probably going to look at the first 2 or 3 races and then kind of assess how the teams are looking and how it might develop in the 2020 season. Obviously we can't do that today because we have no F1. So I think what we're going to change it to is looking at, obviously the coronavirus has been a big impact on the season, and yeah, we're going to kind of look at what are the implications that the coronavirus might have on F1 for the 2020 season, mainly on kind of the teams, the drivers, the season as a whole, and yeah, just kind of have a chat around there. So I'll start it off with you. Obviously, we were getting ready. We're all excited for Australia coming up. Would be a couple of weeks ago now, wouldn't it? It's all happened so quickly in there. But yeah, obviously that news broke on the Thursday, wasn't it, that McLaren had someone tested positive for coronavirus, and then it was cancelled.
Yeah, that was quite a shock.
It really was. So what was your kind of feelings around the Australian Grand Prix?
Well, I mean, obviously I was super excited. Obviously gone a few months over Christmas, just no racing at all, getting super excited for the season, and to get so close to the season starting and have it taken out from under us was very, very heartbreaking. But yeah, what happened with McLaren and the personnel at McLaren getting coronavirus was very sad. And it was, once that had been announced that this guy had contracted coronavirus, I think everyone didn't want to admit it, but everyone sort of knew that it was either going to be postponed or cancelled or something big was going to happen. So frustrating, but understandable, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And luckily that person has fully recovered and shows no signs of coronavirus. So that's, first of all, the good thing from that. But yeah, it was kind of a shock. It was on the eve because I think it broke around about Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening for us, and it then pretty much went all the way through the night with them having a meeting at like 3 a.m. in Australia, and it was a surprise it took them that long. I know there's kind of lots of I's to dot and T's to cross in terms of it's not just as simple as cancelling an F1 race, but they probably should have said as soon as the McLaren person got announced that we can't do this, and you know, we've got to postpone Australia, we're about to have a meeting, we'll fill you in after that, kind of the formal details of how we're going to proceed. I think that probably would have been the only thing I would have had a go at F1. Not really had a go, but you know, maybe, you know what I mean.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have sort of an update from them rather than us sort of just being sat there twiddling our thumbs, being like, "What is going on?" But you have got to think of how much goes into a Formula One weekend. So many people, so many different things. Like, I can only imagine how difficult that is to set up on a normal day, let alone when all of this is going on suddenly in the space of a few hours. You've got to sort all this. So I can give credit to the guys at Formula One for doing their best, but it would have been nice to keep the fans updated a little bit more. Yeah, I can agree with you there.
Yeah, I think people, I think, are a lot more understanding as long as there's like a line of communication. As soon as you leave people in the dark, it becomes a little bit difficult on that. But yeah, so obviously Australia was cancelled, and then as things escalated and got bigger and bigger, you know, Bahrain was naturally always going to be probably postponed, being the week later, and then subsequently has. And we're now up to, what is it, 6 cancelled races up to date? We've got Australia, Bahrain, Hanoi, China, Spain, Zandvoort, Monaco. That might be, yeah, that's 7. Baku just cancelled, so we're now up to 8. So we're now up to 8 cancelled Grand Prix. And, well, first of all, how do you feel about that? We've now, the earliest it's going to start is May.
Oh, mate, it's heartbreaking, honestly. That's the only word I can use. Absolutely heartbreaking. The excitement inside of me is still bubbling away, really wanting to see some racing. But as I said earlier, it's a completely understandable situation. Hopefully it can come back in sort of May, June time. I've been seeing that they've been saying we're going to have a reduced season with but I heard 18 out of 22 races could be the possibility. But I think everyone's just speculating at the moment. And it would be lovely to see the season come back at that stage, but we'd have to see some serious improvement with the virus situation for that to happen.
Exactly. It's not just because it's literally worldwide, and because F1 is a worldwide sport. That's it. And obviously, you know, bearing in mind as part of this conversation, the health and safety of everyone is obviously the paramount stuff. I think it's just 2 rambling F1 fans in terms of, you know, how it's affected us as fans, and yeah, we'll have a discussion how we think it might affect it. But you know, obviously MotoGP and Formula E were the first ones to kind of postpone there, but the main reason I think F1 took longer is because it's bigger than both of them, and financially the implications, you know, I think are going to be huge on F1 and for the circuit. So first question is, do you think any F1 circuits, you know, might go under because of this virus?
Well, I would really hope not. With a circuit that's able to get enough monetary backing to get around for a Formula One event, I don't think that it would. I think they should all be fine, and I think that once, like, we know that the season's going to restart at some point, so I think they can take what's the word for it? They can take solace in the fact that it's definitely going to come back at some point. But I'm feeling more that smaller tracks in the UK and other places, they're going to be hit a lot harder than places such as like Silverstone and that.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. And obviously Silverstone did renegotiate that deal because, well, Silverstone actually might have been a track real in trouble if it was on its current, on last year's kind of deal with Liberty Media, because, you know, they shed out a load of cost to host a Grand Prix, so I guess they're going to lose that. But, you know, the Grand Prix weekend, I think, is probably Silverstone's biggest weekend of the year, comfortably,
100%.
By making money. And so it is going to be a massive kind of financial cost of doing it. And we may, obviously, F1 will probably subsidise and make allowances to kind of keep circuits on the calendar, but I think long-term repercussions, it could really struggle for a few circuits, and it's probably not I mean, we're all excited about Hanoi and Zandvoort starting. It's really not the ideal start for them, is it?
No, that's really, really bad for them. So I feel super bad for the guys. Obviously, they've pumped so much money, especially into Hanoi, of like completely relaying all these streets to make this circuit, putting all these new buildings down to make sure it all works with pits and everything like that. And now they've expected all this money to come back through the Grand Prix that's going to be happening there, and obviously other smaller races that they'll have at the track as well. And now none of this is going ahead, so there's a huge burning hole in the pocket of whoever has funded that.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think, you know, it wasn't necessarily going to be that well attended anyway, because the problem with new tracks, Zandvoort's lucky because it does have F1 history and it has probably one of the most fanatical fan bases in the world in terms of the Orange Army supporting Max. So you kind of feel like they'd go, look, this is unprecedented situation. It's really difficult, but you could go. But Hanoi, it was struggling to kind of, I think, gather interest. I know it was probably one of the cheaper Grand Prix to actually get to if you could get to Vietnam. Just trying to encourage people to go. Because obviously it's a fresh track. Nobody knows what the racing's going to be like. Is it going to be good? Vietnam's not the easiest place to get to, although obviously a very popular holiday destination, I reckon, because it is a very picturesque place, Vietnam. But yeah, I think they'll certainly be hit the harder out of the two new tracks.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. As you were saying, with the Max Verstappen brigade are sort of going to be able to keep the Zandvoort race alive, but Hanoi is so new and unprecedented that we really have no idea what it's going to be like. And at the moment, considering its geographical location and closeness to China, of where this whole thing started, that people are definitely going to, even if it's only subconsciously, think that it is sort of need to be more cautious with going there, especially even just after the virus has happened and sort of cleared up. People are still going to be possibly a little bit scared to go back to that region of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's massively going to affect it on a cautious level. And, it is a difficult one because, like I said, F1 is so kind of financially backed by sponsors. You don't know who sponsors might go out of business, and the expensive of hosting a Grand Prix. It really is difficult on that front, but I think we'll switch our focus now to the teams and the drivers themselves. So first of all, obviously it's confirmed. The week before had Anthony on, and we were discussing the 2021 regulations obviously being pushed back to 22. That it wasn't confirmed at the time, but it now is. So how do you think the chassis, I think, are frozen for 2021? So how do you think this is going to affect the teams going forward in that aspect?
Well, I mean, starting with 2020, it's going to be difficult with a lot of people are talking about all this DAS, Mercedes and DAS, and how they've really got messed up in 2020 with people able to increase their development and possibly catch up easier now we don't have the first races. But for 2021, it's going to be tough. I think they're going to have a lot more time to create these new cars now, and I think that I don't know. I think it's going to be. I think it might actually be worse because I feel like now they're going to have more time to look at these new regulations and to really, really, really plan out the cars. And although that's going to make the cars better, I feel like the uncertainty of all these new changes was what sort of created the excitement of the new regulations of the 2021 season. But now it's been pushed back, all this new time. I'm not sure. It's a lot of speculation. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, so obviously, a lot of the teams were going to pump a load of money into the R&D this year, but with the budget cap in 2021, it is looking at kind of reducing the costs and doing there, but we don't know how much teams might struggle financially this year with the burden of not competing. So they may be within the budget cap, but they may not be able to have spent as much money as what they could have done. But I suppose it's kind of damage limitation.
Yeah, it is sort of damage limitation. I feel like for now they're changing the regulations to 2022. It's going to depend a lot on whether the season comes back at the end of 2020, whether they cancel it, or depending on how many races come back, because then we're going to see how much R&D they can get out of this short space of time, and that's again going to benefit the richer teams such as Mercedes and Ferrari and that, who even over sort of maybe a reduced season of 18, 17 races can still pump loads of money in, whereas a team maybe such as Williams, who have had to, obviously all teams have had to continue paying wages on that over the virus, but they've then lost all this money to the virus by paying wages and stuff, and now don't have as much money left for the end of the season to put into R&D. So it could create even more of a gap between the teams. So might be doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, Absolutely, and that one, it is, like we said, that is a pure speculative point, and in fairness, everything in this video probably is a speculative point at this stage, because we have no idea what's going on. We have no idea whether we'll see racing this season, and that's probably a good point. It's
a really depressing point, is that what that is?
Yeah, that is. I mean, honestly, right now, what do you feel? Do you feel like we will see racing this year?
Oh, mate, that is a big question. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Oh, with what we're seeing now, all of the cases in Europe are continuing to rise. People are continuing to die at a larger and larger rate, and at the moment, it doesn't seem like it's going to stop, and it doesn't seem like we're getting largely any closer to a cure of some sort. So at the moment, I'm very, very skeptical for it coming back at all this season. I feel like just hodgepodging a season together in sort of 4 or 5 months at the end of the year, it's just going to be a little bit lackluster. And I feel like it might be better, even just for F1's image in general, to just scrap it off, be like, right, that's fine, that's done. The 2020 season never happened. Let's just move on. 2021, like we're starting fresh again.
The positive is, although not positive for us as fans, because the wait has been longer, but they didn't start the season, or they weren't kind of like, the football season. It's nobody kind of knows how that's going to finish in its way.
Yeah, that's even more frustrating, because especially for Liverpool fans as such, I have very limited knowledge on football, so I won't get too deep into this, but I know that Liverpool are winning, so for them it must be agonising to be sat there just not knowing if it's going to come back, or when it's going to come back, or what's going to happen.
Exactly, for being a couple of wins, I think, away from winning their first title in the Premier League era. For this to happen, it must be devastating. Obviously, everyone, I think, in this instant is like, there's a bigger picture to all of this than kind of sport events, but it is still the kind of little things, they are a disappointment, and they affect people's lives, and all those players who've kind of worked the entirety of the season up until that point, for it, if it was then to be void because they couldn't complete the season, it would it would kind of be crazy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and all of their momentum that they've built up of all these wins and stuff has just been completely voided now. So in one sense, I'm quite glad that Australia was actually cancelled at the last minute, because imagine how bad it would be now if we'd had the Australian Grand Prix, the teams had got the points or whatever, it had been an official race, and then from Bahrain it had been cancelled. Then we'd be, what is going on?
Exactly. It would have just been absolutely chaotic. But with things like the Olympics has officially been postponed, hasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
And the Euros were postponed as well, and those are kind of global events obviously Euros is European based, in July. So it kind of feels like, it's getting later and later, these things that have been cancelled and postponed. I suppose with those things, there's a lot more things you have to put into play, and they're being probably better safe than sorry. But yeah, you're right. I don't think we can have a season, even if we start in August, like August, September, October, November, and part of December, say, something like that, and we pretty much have a week every race. A race every week, that would make sense more. A week every race. But, I mean, as fans, I imagine, if it got to that stage, we'd be buzzing. But it would almost put an immense amount of stress on the teams if we asked them to do that.
Yeah, no, it'd be huge. I just cannot see it in my head working. As much as I want it to work, I just can't. It just does not seem viable. Just does not seem viable at this current moment.
Yeah, and it's just the more and more kind of places, everyone's at different stages as well, and the problem is, I suppose, a lot of the teams are based in the UK, so I suppose once, the UK is cleared up, they can probably start putting more firmer plans in place. But I suppose nothing can really be done until, the UK is cleared up, because it is an instrumental place in the running of Formula One because of so many factories being based here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I've just thought of a sort of query for you. If teams that are in other countries, such as you've got Ferrari in Italy, Italy had their peak a lot earlier than we're having ours of cases. So if theirs goes down and they clear up faster than the UK does, would it be unfair on the competition for Ferrari to be allowed to go back to the Ferrari workers to go back to the factory and continue development for the season if teams that are in the UK are not allowed to do so and are still under quarantine?
I mean, yeah, in terms of sportsmanship, no, that wouldn't. And if I was Ferrari and Alfa Tauri and Alfa Romeo, would I maybe push my luck a little bit? Probably, because it's all about getting the edge. It maybe wouldn't sit right with these things, but I suppose they were being affected a lot, and the other teams didn't close down their factories until the enforced summer break came in, did it?
That's true.
So they could kind of be like, they don't owe anyone necessarily to do that. I would hope in that sort of situation that F1 would step in and extend the factory closure.
Yeah, but then they also have to sort of mediate the, especially with teams with less money, if they're manually adding on a longer period of closure, then the F1 teams are going to say, well, can you pay for our staff then during that closure? Because that's not very fair. We could be open now and you're not allowing us to. So maybe Formula One wouldn't want to do that because they wouldn't want to take the money out of their pockets.
You see that is where this whole situation there isn't black and whites in terms of clear-cut decisions, what you can make in this there. It's all very grey. It's all, everything's kind of finely linked together in terms of it isn't just as simple as saying yes or no. There's so many strings attached to all these that, I definitely don't envy, Chase and Jean Todt and everyone, Ross Brawn.
Me neither.
I do not envy them whatsoever what they have to deal in this situation. But so we kind of thought about, I think we're both kind of like in agreement. It probably wouldn't feel right to have a world championship, but maybe they could use the time to experiment with some feature races. So obviously, I know the teams rejected like reverse grids and changes to qualifying. We kind of said it, me and Ash, in a couple of weeks in our kind of ridiculous versus realistic video, in terms of maybe bringing in some sprint races and feature races like F2 and F3, at calendar, but not making it a world championship, but maybe used it as an idea to kind of experiment with a few things.
That could be interesting as well. But again, I've got to bring up the money side of, will teams think it's worth it for development to be spending all that money to come out to a race if there's no points up for grabs?
It's very true. Yeah, very true. If there's no points and there's no competitive, I don't know whether they class it as, prize money is still awarded, but just you don't get classified in the overall World Constructors and World Drivers' Championships in the history of the sport, if that makes sense. Maybe it's a unique championship for 1 year that, gets a unique trophy, and but the prize money, obviously, I would assume is still there, or maybe cut accordingly, with money lost during this period. So then that would probably still incur teams in to do well and to still get their prize money as such, and it would satisfy some need for racing. But it is such a difficult decision.
Yeah, no, that would be a really interesting idea. But then again, we're in such unprecedented times that every idea is going to be a completely new idea and no one really knows what's going on. But at the end of the day, everything comes down to money. So if there's going to be money involved, teams are going to be interested. If there's not, they're probably not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I now kind of probably think, obviously drivers, 2021 was expected to be a huge market. Obviously some of the big names had already signed in terms of Max and Charles had obviously committed their futures to Red Bull and Ferrari respectively. And, you know, Sergio Perez was linked to Racing Point, now going to obviously be Aston Martin. But do you imagine that pretty much every driver will stay?
I think surely the Formula One and the teams have to give their drivers this. I think they just have to. Oh, it's so difficult. It's if they carry on with the season this year and it's a sort of 18 race season at the end of the year. Will that count as the contracted 2020 season, and then they're going to have to redesign their contract for 2021? But now that the regulations have been moved back to 22, will it get voided? Will it? Oh, it's all so confusing, man. Also confusing.
Yeah, it is, and it seems weird if we are lucky enough to get 18 races during the season, which, you know, that would constitute a world championship for me, because obviously looking at the past, you know, we've had world championships. In fairness, even 15 probably would still constitute a world championship. Looking at, you know, the early kind of years of Formula One, it obviously would be unprecedented in modern times, but it wasn't too long ago that, you know, 18 races was the race calendar, I believe. So, yeah, if someone say, I don't know, I'll pick out Giovinazzi. Say Giovinazzi has an absolute mare in those 18 races. You know, is that enough for him to be dropped and for Schwartzman and Mick Schumacher to be promoted into that alpha seat? You know, would that be fair, or does everyone kind of go, you know what, we should probably, this has been kind of a weird season, we should probably just stick with everyone?
I think F1 being the top level of motor racing, I feel like it's so cutthroat out there that even if the season does go ahead with, as you were saying, an amount of races that makes it a championship season and makes it okay to be judged against other seasons, I think that, yeah, if anyone has a stonker and just does absolutely terribly, I think it's completely fair game that their seat should be up for grabs for people in the lower divisions. I think it's very unfair to the people in the lower divisions to say, oh, because this has been so difficult, these guys should get a free pass, because they're only getting older and they're only getting closer to their expiry date. So I think they should be completely fair game to be up for grabs for those seats.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think if we get racing, I think it's fair enough, and a substantial amount of racing, which 18 races I would still constitute as a substantial amount. You know, I think it's fair for them to be judged fairly on that. If you know we don't get any racing, I imagine it is the case. I can just say their contract will just be extended with the current terms for 1 year, and I don't think there'd be any changes on that front, because, you know, people wouldn't have anything to base it on performance, and there'd be so much uncertainty that they just want to kind of keep things as simple and not throw a new driver into the mix. Because could you imagine, you know, if say has finally got rid of Roman Grosjean, or say something like that, and they brought in someone new for the start of the 21 season, that would be kind of mental, wouldn't it? You know, after a whole season off, to come into a new team, I think it would be kind of crazy to manage, and it probably wouldn't be fair to put a new driver in that situation.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. I think that'd be completely unfair. I just couldn't see any team doing that just for their reputation at stake. I don't think they could be seen as being so cutthroat and ruthless, as we've seen with teams such as Red Bull cutting Gasly out halfway through the season and putting Albon in, at least they had some sort of base to put that decision on of saying he hasn't done well enough in his previous races. And I think for a team to just say, right, we've changed our mind on this guy, we're going to change him out, this guy looks pretty good, who's in a lower formula, we're going to bring him up, I think that would be completely unfair and would completely ruin the confidence of not only that driver that's been kicked out, but all of the other drivers on the grid as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The knock-on of effect would be really bad, and just purely, like you said, if nothing else, on a PR decision, it would almost be kind of media suicide to kind of make that sort of decision. Yeah,
no, the media would be in a complete frenzy about that. And it would just be completely terrible publicity. I can definitely say that we would be chatting about it on our channel, saying, what has blank team done doing this? But I just can't imagine it.
Yeah, exactly. They would come under severe, heavy, and a lot of criticism. So we've looked at the teams, we've looked at the drivers and kind of like the F1 calendar, how it might kind of progress in this sort of thing. Obviously, today has been a far more, I think, relaxed structure, because I think that's all it can be in terms of this type of topic, because there's so much uncertainty. You can't really give any definitive answers with anything, but
it has to just be all opinions being thrown about.
Exactly, but some interesting ones for 2021. Although the rules have been pushed back to 2022, McLaren's deal with Mercedes will still come in 2021, and obviously, Racing Point will undergo their rebranding to Aston Martin still in 2021. So, what do you make for those two teams? Could they really benefit from this kind of pushback and the break?
Yeah, I think they definitely could. With the Racing Point, I don't think that's going to have too much of an impact, because obviously not a huge amount is changing. It's really just a name change, and Mr. Stroll just continuously pumping in more and more and more money, and that's not going to change. But with McLaren, that's definitely going to be very interesting, because they were starting off 2021, new rules, new engine, everything starting off as a fresh. But now they're able to maybe get more data from 2021 to then give forward to 22. So possibly that could assist them, but also maybe it could hinder them, because they're getting data from the old cars now and not the new cars, and it could sort of scupper them a little bit. But again, complete speculation.
I agree. I think McLaren are certainly the ones who could benefit, and I think it'd be really interesting, because we don't know. Like I said, the chassis, I believe, have been frozen for the 2021 season, so they can't bring in to kind of aid in cutting the costs of car development. So they have to use the one that they've developed this year. And this year they developed it around about the British Grand Prix, I reckon. Well, that was the report. So they started development on this very early. So if you then put in what's consistently been the best engine through the hybrid era into their car, it'll be interesting to see how their chassis holds up compared to the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull. And, we're not expecting like McLaren to go and compete for the championship, but, Carlos Sainz obviously got that fortuitous podium in Brazil, but based on his season performance, no one really kind of probably begrudges him that podium. But it'd be interesting, could we see McLaren like genuinely get on the podium, as in they deserve to be there on race pace?
Yeah, I think they definitely deserve to be there. I think they deserve to be there this year. If there was no coronavirus outbreak, I think they definitely would have got fourth place in the championship, possibly challenged by Racing Point at the beginning of the season, but I think once they got into their stride, they would have been fine. And Carlos Sainz is tried and tested to do well. He can put in the solid performances, and he's picking up sort of fifths and sixths all around the shop. Lando, being a rookie, was a little bit more untested and had to get into his stride a little bit more, but I feel this year, and obviously now pushed back to next year, they're going to be fighting a lot higher up the grid, and they're going to be a lot more consistent with their points as well. So I think they would definitely could challenge, and I'd be very surprised if Carlos or even Lando didn't get one or possibly more podiums in 2021.
Yeah, it would be. I think it would be fantastic for F1 because that would be a fourth team then kind of competing and fighting for places, and more competition for places generally leads to better racing, unless obviously the team out in front just storm ahead in Mercedes. But hopefully, things aren't that case. I think we just recorded. I think it would come out a couple of weeks ago. We're doing a motorsport manager career, and in that race, the first race finished Verstappen first, Hamilton second, and Albon third. So what an interesting start to the season that would be if that happened in 2021 with that kind of result with Red Bull up. But Racing Point, obviously going into Aston Martin, the only positive would be it looks like they've very much taken inspiration from Mercedes' aero concept. Obviously, that was one of the huge talking points from testing in terms of how similar it looked to the previous championship winning car. In this period, will they be able to get a better understanding of, how that car functions and how that car works, so that, if they did get it all together, and that factory have proven time and time again that they can get the most out of minimal means for the team. That would be why Racing Point and Aston Martin would be very interesting for me in 2021.
Yeah, no, they would definitely be interesting to watch. I think you put it very nicely there to the Racing Point. I think that they are just a definite copy. Like, they have just looked at the car and gone, right, we need a fast car, we've got lots of money, let's just backwards develop this, basically, and just see how they've managed to get it so quick. I feel like, obviously, it can go one of two ways. They could, as you said, get the best out of the material that they've got and just do incredibly and really, really quickly break into this top three. Or it could really hinder them just sort of having a copying design of the Mercedes and actually possibly see them fall back through the grid, similarly to how Renault have continuously pumped in money and seen no positives out of it. So we'll have to wait and see, I think.
Yeah, I think behind it, to me, was always a money-saving decision, and it was a really smart move, I thought. They've seen something that's tried and tested. One of the biggest kind of overhauls of the sport in recent times is coming into play then was the year after. If they could just get it right and be competitive in the midfield, get somewhere between 4th and 6th again, with a tried and tested method, without having to kind of develop it too much, it meant that they could probably focus more time on the then 2021, obviously now 2022 rules. So it was a smart decision for me. Like I said, it could go wrong, but the way that they work as a team, for me, very much, I'd back them more to get it right than I would to get it wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I would definitely back them more to get it right. But I also have to think on sort of an ethical side of if Racing Point are able to backwards develop this Mercedes winning car, then start the season and immediately get into the top three and start challenging Red Bull, Ferrari, and even possibly Mercedes. What, apart from money, obviously, but what stops the other teams from thinking, well, they've just gone and done that. FIA have said that's fine, we're just going to do the same. And then we get a grid of all the same cars.
Which, obviously, we need to avoid in Formula 1, which I spoke with Anthony last week about it, in terms of we've got to make sure that it doesn't become a spec series, because the engineering innovations is what makes F1 F1. So you've got to make your own car. But I suppose for us fans, we see the shell. And the aero, obviously, is the big shell of the car, and so that's where we can easily understand the most. There is so much going on underneath the car that still is individual and unique I guess, in its way. Obviously, they still have the Mercedes power unit as well. But, so, even if they've just kind of taken inspiration, like I said, it pretty much is a carbon copy for the car, it's still... There's still probably a lot of their own engineering going into it, that it still kind of keeps the ethics of the sport.
Yeah. I do agree with you on that there's obviously loads going on underneath. They're not just putting in these hundreds of millions to shape the metal on the outside a bit. There's so much going on underneath with different parts of the car. But, as you said, we can't see that, so we can't judge the car on that. Especially now that the season hasn't started and we can't judge them on performance. All we can see is that exterior, and it looks exactly the same. So, ethically, I'm on the fence with this one. I'm on the fence.
It was, and it is an interesting point. But regardless, I don't think it would be an issue, because everything's changing so much in 2021 that I feel it would be a one-season thing, and that I think if it became more of a regular thing, the FIA would be harder on it, because that is how you are constituted as a constructor. You have to build your own race car to be a constructor. That's the kind of basis of Formula One. It isn't a spec series, so everyone doesn't get like the same model and just has to adjust setup. They've got to build their own race car. I know Haas kind of very much put that to the test in terms of buying in the maximum amount of things they can buy in. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with you there. Completely agree with everything you said there. I don't really have too much to add to that.
In terms of that, but I think this is probably a good point to probably round off the Corona chat, in terms of, obviously, it is something that's unprecedented on a world level, because everything is so well connected. The world has never had to experience a virus spreading at the rate that it has done, and so therefore the knock-on effect to something like Formula One is crazy. And it's been really interesting just discussing, and like we said, it is all opinions. We're just kind of a couple of F1 fans spouting some thoughts that are randomly going in our heads. That's all right. We always claim not to be experts on the channel, so you're right, Sir Meerkat. You are safe.
Okay.
But yeah, it's kind of been interesting chatting about it, and unfortunately, it is a kind of sit tight and wait and see what happens. But probably in conclusion, there are quite a few repercussions that could happen, but expect within the next year or two everything to very much stay the same, because ethically that kind of feels right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think a lot of it is going to be just pushed back to next year, and from next year, as you said, it's going to be like nothing ever happened, really. But all of the speculation that's happening now, it's all around what is going to happen this year, what are we going to see this year, and only time will tell with how this virus continues to spread, whether we're able to find a cure, and just what happens in general. Yeah, but we'll have to keep waiting on updates from Formula One, and just hope, pray, cross our fingers, cross our toes, and just please, racing come back soon.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're all struggling, and we're especially struggling with being in the full lockdown, and I can only I think you'll share the thoughts in. Obviously, we wish everyone's kind of safe out there, as safe as we can be in these kind of troubling times, and kind of just listen to the advice, and hopefully that means that we can get through this quicker, and we can get our lives back quicker, and means we can start hopefully enjoying racing back quicker, which would be it. But thank you so much for coming on today, mate. Did you enjoy being part of the podcast?
No, mate, I hated every second. No, I'm joking. Loved it, mate. So happy to be on. Thank you very much for allowing me to be on your channel, and hopefully your viewers accept me and like me and go down below and go onto my channel. That would be fantastic.
I'm sure they will. And yeah, just said that. I will leave a description, obviously, to MotoMeerkat's channel in the description below.
Thank you very much, mate.
Please do go and check out his channel. Really great guy. But what's kind of the best way of describing you is kind of F1 topic based there. And obviously you were, hopefully, where you did start your kind of preview series that, you know, looking ahead to the races. But I imagine a lot of the plans for the channel...
Don't remind me.
I know. I imagine a lot of the plans for the channel got put on hold like everything else has on this season. So I imagine it'll be like all us F1 YouTubers at the moment. It'll be a lot of topics, and yeah, it'd be really great, really interesting to hear thoughts, and a passionate guy, and great videos that you put out. They're really enjoyable and usually kind of short and snappy to the point, and yeah, kind of quite easy to enjoy in a bite-sized form, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. Yeah, I try and make them sort of short, easy to watch, easy to indulge in, but I've got loads of ideas. I did, as you say, have loads of ideas for the new season, things to do around races, but yeah, all that's been completely buggered. So we move on. It's absolutely fine. I've got some new ideas that are going to come to the channel very soon, so I look forward to it. And F1 fanatics will definitely be involved on my channel, so make sure you go over there and wait for those videos.
Absolutely, we cannot wait to kind of return the favour and come across onto your channel, mate. But that is a roundup of this F1 Worldwide podcast. It was obviously a bit more rambly than the usual one, but that's what it is, this kind of fan podcast. It is an F1 chat. We usually get a topic, and obviously this topic is very relevant, and you know it's affected the world as well as F1 kind of hugely on a scale, and it was fantastic to have MotoMeerkat on to kind of chat through things. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode, and if you're new around here and you haven't done so already, you can subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification, and you can keep up to date with all our latest videos coming out through, we like to affectionately call it on the channel, the Corona break. And you know, like I said, go and check out MotoMeerkat's channel. But for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.